Let's talk. Joining us now is Mor Sobel. Professor Sobel is the Assistant Professor of Diplomacy and International Relationships at Danjiang University. Welcome, Professor.
Pleasure being here.
The first question would go to that we know there's so many pro-Palestinian protests going on globally, especially in the universities, even graduations were canceled because it's such a large scale. But at the same time, people in Israel actually starts to go against the Israeli government of using the armed force as well. Mm-hmm. But the Israeli government seems to be very strict and insisting on this armed force attitude. So why is that?
Yeah, well, definitely there were many demonstrations since Israel started its operation in the Gaza Strip. But now the situation escalated dramatically, mainly in the US, but also in Europe. And there are demonstrations also in Israel calling for ceasefire. But we have to differentiate between the different actors and why people are demonstrating, right? Generally speaking, anyhow, I don't think that the Israeli government will be influenced by the demonstrations. They have a clear idea what they want to do, which is to continue with the operation and eliminate Hamas. In the context of the Israeli demonstrations, I think that the idea is not about whether we want Hamas out or not, it's about what comes first. And for many Israelis, what comes first is the release of the 132 hostages being held in Gaza. They want that first and then to continue the operations, because they think that if we go into Rafah, that might lead to
the danger of the hostages.
Yes, indeed. With the other demonstrations around the world, here I think that there is a mixture of motives between anti-Semitic groups to Islamic groups to pro-Palestinians, and a lot of demonstrations that are being held on college campuses are actually being organized not by students. So there is other actors involved here, but obviously they are of grave concern, and they definitely damage the international legitimacy of Israel and its operations.
Because of the government structure that's actually going on now in Israel, we can see that the Knesset, even though it's almost like it's half that it's far right, but it's not overall far right. But now the Israeli government seems to be overall far right. So what is going on?
Well, it's slightly more complicated than that. And Netanyahu is really in a very, very difficult situation, because Netanyahu, one could argue, is being held by his coalition partners. Netanyahu is leading a very, very fragile coalition, which consists of far-right partners that have a very, very clear idea what they want to do, right? And he needed to please them, keep them happy, or at least not angry, in order to keep the government intact. Because once the coalition falls and his government falls, that's most probably the end of his political career, and not to mention his very problematic legal issues that he will have to face. So Netanyahu is really trying not to go against them, but it's still on a level of statements rather than deeds. I don't think that a far-right extremist policy is what Israel is about, or what leads Israel forward in its relationship with the Palestinians.
Can we say that the democracy in Israel is falling apart?
I cannot say that democracy is falling apart. You definitely could see very worrisome trends, and those trends started even before October 7th and even before this government. There were very dramatic demonstrations and turning events following the attempt to do judicial reforms in Israel, and actually to break the separation of branches, and that the executive branch will hold power on the judicial branch. And that was very worrisome to a lot of Israelis, and that's why hundreds of thousands of Israelis go out to the street to demonstrate against the government. Now, I would like to make something very, very clear, that most of the Israelis are against Netanyahu and against the views of his government, but they are definitely on the same page regarding the objective of eliminating Hamas. The only difference here might be what comes first, the hostages or eliminating Hamas.
Like according to Hazem, what he told me was that for Palestinian people, we're also like under like high pressure control under the Israeli government. Especially at the border, they see like very terrible things happening, and they're not even treated like humans. So like, who are we actually freeing them from? Is it from the Israeli government? Is it from the Hamas? Or like?
I think that the Palestinians are in a very, very tough place.
Yes.
Because definitely it's very, very difficult to live under Israeli occupation, but it's also very, very difficult to live under authoritarian regime, because be it Gaza or be it the West Bank, there is no democracy there. Yeah, there are no elections. Once the winning party won the elections, that's the end, right? That's why there are no elections in the West Bank as well, because the Palestinian Authority are afraid that Hamas will win, and that will be the end of the Palestinian Authority. And here I think that at least, or especially under the current settings, both people deserve better leaders, because otherwise we won't be able to move forward.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you believe that Hamas is actually a sort of asset for the Israeli government.
Yeah, well, Hamas was considered an asset to the Israeli government. And the issue was that under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu, for quite a long time, the Israeli government saw Hamas as a valuable political actor, because Netanyahu was not very interested or was not very motivated to move forward with peace negotiations. And the rise of Hamas provided a perfect argument why we cannot move forward from the Israeli side. Because the argument is, listen, you have two Palestines. You have one Palestine in Gaza, controlled by Hamas, one Palestine in the West Bank, controlled by the Palestinian Authority. They do not get along, both organizations. It's much beyond being a political competitor like DPP or KMT. They are enemies. Put them in the same room, they will kill each other, something that actually already happened following the elections in Gaza. So the Israel argument will be, how can we move forward with negotiations when you have two Palestines? So who we are supposed to talk to? And that obviously has proved to be a grave, grave mistake, because with all the problems of the Palestinian Authority, corruption, and some other problems, it's still the more rational, moderate actor in comparison to Hamas. So if we want to move forward, we need to re-establish a better relationship with the Palestinian Authority.
Okay, so ceasefire seems not possible currently. The military use is continuing. Would it actually eliminate Hamas?
Well, here we touch upon the question of what do you mean by eliminate Hamas, right? So we could divide this question into the military power, or the military component, and the political component. Militarily, definitely, Israel and the IDF could eliminate Hamas. To some extent, in short and medium term,
That would be the current member of Hamas.
Yeah, Israel has already done it. Hamas, for the time being, is done as a military organization. With all the respect to the 4 battalions still in Rafah. As an organized military structure, Hamas is done. But this is not the problem. The problem is the political component. Because we have seen in the last couple of months that every time that Israel and the IDF leaves a certain area in the Gaza Strip, Hamas immediately goes back and seizes power. Even in case where some local actors are trying to step in, Hamas will execute them just in order to make a point, we are in charge. No one else could replace us. And without a plan, who comes after Hamas, who is going to de-radicalize the Palestinian population in Gaza, who is going to demilitarize Gaza, we are facing a problem, because if Israel leaves Gaza, Hamas immediately will take power again and regain its power as the governor of Gaza, and maybe after a couple of years, rebuild its military capabilities, and we are back to square one. Yeah, so Israel and the international community has to ensure that there is a plan for an actor to put instead of Hamas in Gaza.
Definitely, and especially when there's so many orphans that's currently, children became orphans in Gaza under all these attacks. When they grow up, they might form the next generation of Hamas. This is just like an endless cycle of tragedy. So how is that ever able to eliminate?
Well, that's obviously a very, very difficult question, and to say that there is no hope is it's a bit depressing. We have to make sure that there are people who are working towards a certain goal to make life better for everyone. And if we look at the history, Germany changed, Japan changed after the Second World War. Israel made peace with some of its most bitter enemies. Yeah? So we have a possibility to do something, but we have to make sure that we will do it the right way. And what do I mean by that? First, Hamas and Netanyahu's government have to go. Yeah? We need other leaderships. Both people deserve better leaderships. Beyond that, if we're talking on the Israeli side, if we want to create a new government, it will be better that it will be slightly more moderate. And I think that it will be wise to give a stronger role for the Arab communities in Israel, because their perspective on the conflict changed dramatically after October 7th. Yeah? So to bring them into the government, Arab politicians and Arab parties, in order to have more local stakeholders. From the Palestinian side, obviously Hamas has to go. The Palestinian Authority, with the support of the international community and other Arab actors, have to deal with the reconstruction of Gaza and have to make sure that there are other actors in Gaza who will make things better for everyone. And here I'm not only talking about infrastructure and rebuilding Gaza, but the mindset of the Palestinian population in Gaza has to change, in Gaza and in the West Bank. And that's going to take time. Yeah? Not only because of 75 years of occupation, but the mental and physical scars for the Palestinians and the Israelis, it will take time, but it will have to be together with Arab actors and not only Israel and Western alliance, and it will have to be top-down, much like what Arab countries did following the Abraham Accords, to change the mindset of their own population regarding their perspective about Israel.
Eventually will appear. Thank you so much, Mor, for joining us and sharing with us your expertise.
Thank you.